Tundra Media presents The Mayor Helps, with the Mayor of Victoria, British Columbia, Lisa Helps. Have your say. Send your questions and comments to themayorhelps.com. They could be included in next week's
Victoria
show.
Businesses to know that we're working.
And now, here's your host, from beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, Dave Hatt.
Welcome to The Mayor Helps. I'm Dave Hatt, and I'm here with Mayor Lisa Helps. Good morning, Mayor. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Good morning.
So I wanted to talk to you today in our State of the City discussion about, the F-bomb that is social media.
Yeah.
It's something that is, wow, the potential is staggering. And I think it's as yet untapped, but we're living in a situation where even I find myself not distancing myself from my friends, but kind of muting my friends and some of their conversation. You're at a whole different level because you're in a situation where, as a politician, clearly you got into this knowing that you were going to get hammered on some sides, but how does it impact you to be able to do your job when you're trying to share information and it's either misinterpreted or you get the pushback of it doesn't matter what you say, I don't believe you. Does a show like this help get your message out?
A show like this is incredibly useful. And I wrote a blog post over the weekend, and I've got to update it because I listed all the ways that people could get in touch with me. And one of them, of course, is The Mayor Helps. We've got, one person or two people sometimes on here who get to, sit face to face and ask a question. So I'll update the blog post with that. So yeah, this show definitely helps. And for me, it's not so much about getting a message out. I mean, that's important, but what's really important to me is really good conversations and really good interactions. And so, with first Facebook and then Twitter, it's not a dialogue. There's not a back and forth. This show and other shows like it are really useful because we actually get to have conversations. And I really, one of the things that worries me most, not only as a mayor, but as a human, is that we're forgetting how to have conversations, particularly hard conversations, without doing it in 244 characters. And I think that's really, we've got some complex challenges facing us right now. And one of the things I've really learned in COVID is that relationships are everything. One of the reasons we were able to act so quickly as a city, particularly with the small business community, is we already had those relationships. We've been working together for years. And so if relationships are everything and relationships are built through conversation and we can't have conversations anymore, what does that say about how we're going to get through some of the things that are facing us now and in the future?
Yeah, as interesting you pointed out and used the phrase, as a person. I mean, I found myself apologizing to my kids this past week and saying, I got to apologize because this isn't how things were. Like, there were problems when, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s and, did my 20s in the 90s. So there were problems, racism, misogyny, sexism, all these issues that were not certainly, the awareness wasn't there. Homophobia, using slurs very easily. And having said that, it felt like there was at least an opportunity to have a dialogue. So if you disagreed with somebody or they disagreed with you, or if you wanted to call somebody out and say, hey, you can't say that, then there was at least it appeared as though there was the ability to have that dialogue. Whereas now it's not. It feels like it's not.
And I think that's really dangerous. I mean, look at how you and I first met, right? You reached out to me and said, you're proposing bike lanes on Cook Street. Can you come down to my business and let me show you from my perspective what that would look like? And so I came down and we went for a walk around, and then I understood your perspective. Like, that's, we need more of that, not only about bike lanes, obviously, but just there are a lot of difficult issues facing us. And if we can't kind of have open-hearted conversations, even though we're going to end up disagreeing, like the mayor of Oak Bay and I have had lots of conversations recently about the Richardson Street bike lane, and we've done so really thoughtfully and really respectfully. I totally get his point of view and where he's coming from, and we were able to have like a very mature, thoughtful conversation. And yeah, it is a big worry. So, and I think, your original question was about social media. Social media is not for dialogue. It's for a lot of things, and there's a lot of good that can be done with it, but it's not for dialogue, and it's not really for building understanding of each other's points of view.
Thanks very much for that. I know we've got a good show coming up, and we'll
We
check
do.
you on the other side. Okay, thank you, Mayor Helps.
All right. See you soon.
Ciao.
Have your say. Send your questions and comments to themayorhelps.com. They could be included in next week's show.
Okay, good morning and welcome to the Ask the Mayor portion of our program. And today we've got Hailie Masters, and she's an RMT from Victoria, BC, and she's going to be asking the mayor a question. So Hailie, meet Mayor Lisa Helps.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to meet you.
So my question is regarding, of course, PPE. I do work in the healthcare realm. With COVID, especially during the peak, it was really challenging finding consistent access to PPE, disinfectants, sanitization, and other COVID-related expenses. I'm wondering if the city has considered sourcing or creating any kind of centralized location for small business owners in general, or definitely the healthcare providers, maybe chiropractors, physios, to have access to those things.
We did actually consider it. In the height of the pandemic, I was meeting with business leaders twice a week. And then we went to once a week, and now we're meeting every 2 weeks. And that was something that we discussed. It was suggested. And then we decided that that wasn't something that was really appropriate or possible for the city to take on. But what we did do, I think on our Business Hub site, there's a whole list of places you can access PPE. So rather than ordering them, we put kind of a ease of access for business so that businesses could go and find PPE. But going forward, there was an announcement last week by the federal government about $19 billion of support towards the provinces and municipalities. And that sounded like a really big number and really general answer, or a general announcement rather. But I spoke to somebody in the Deputy Prime Minister's office on Friday, and part of that, I was thinking back to the conversation we had with business. Part of that is the province getting funding for PPE and being able to distribute them, including to small businesses. So I don't know how that's going to work yet, but as soon as we have more information, we'll put it up on our Business Hub site. But yeah, that what you're raising was definitely raised by businesses, and so our response was to put kind of a clearinghouse of options. But I think this announcement from the federal government is even better, particularly if we go into a second wave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Hailie, maybe briefly you could touch on the fact that you've had to change your entire business model from COVID and explain what you've done as a resilient entrepreneur, where you've taken the knocks, but then you've gotten right back up.
Yeah, so what I did actually was I did leave the clinic I was working at and decided to launch a new business during COVID. I had that time to just develop with my partner, and we are doing something a bit different. So we're leaving that static brick and mortar physical location, and we have decided to be an RMT company that goes to the patients, because there's a lot of hesitation to get out, go somewhere. If you are, maybe it's to daycare in the grocery store. You probably don't want to make a third stop at a clinic. So we're going to people's homes, and in doing that, we really want to make sure that we're protecting our patients from us and us from them, and just being really clear on what our protocols are. And we've got a pretty great thing going. But yes, we're mostly worried about just that consistency, because when we can find, say, masks 1 week somewhere, they're not available the following month, and it's a different price and it's somewhere different. So that's kind of what we're just trying to make sure it's a consistent access, I guess, and not wanting to increase fees for our patients, and wanting to supply masks for our patients so they don't have to worry about any of that.
Yeah, that's great. If you could email me, I'll connect you with our business ambassador. So at City Hall, we've got a business hub and a business ambassador, and she'd probably be your best point of contact for sorting this out for the long term, because consistency is really important. Do you guys have a big van?
No. So what we're doing, we're actually going into the homes and into workspaces rather than, I don't know, I do a lot of movement. I don't know if there's a van wide enough for me to do the really therapeutic treatments.
Okay, yeah, because I was visiting a friend a couple weekends ago, and just on the Saanich Victoria border, and I saw, I can't remember if it was acupuncture or something. Anyways, it was a big van, and I couldn't tell from it whether they were doing massages or acupuncture, whatever it was inside, but I thought, oh my God, that's a brilliant business model. So congratulations for pivoting like that. I think you're going to do really well.
Thank you. I think that's actually a food truck. I saw them yesterday, and it's an acupuncture and natural medicine, and they have a food truck style truck, which is quite a bit wider. So
tacos and acupuncture. Tacos and acupuncture. That could be a weird combination.
Yeah. Anyway, Hailie. So my email address is mayor@victoria.ca, and send me an email, and I'll connect you with Quinn. She's our business ambassador, and then she can point you in the right direction. And I'm really curious to know how the province is going to roll out the federal funding for PPE, because that's part of the Safe Restart program. So
thanks for your question, Hailie, and thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Have your say. Send your questions and comments to themayorhelps.com. They could be included in next week's show. And now, Mayor Lisa Helps sits down with this week's special guest.
So today's guest on The Mayor Helps is Bruce Williams, and he is the current CEO of the Victoria Chamber. And Bruce has got a very interesting background, at least certainly to me, a guy that graduated from radio broadcasting school. Bruce is a longtime broadcaster here in Vancouver Island. He was one of the founders of what was the new VI, which is morphed into CTV. He was one of the supervisors of the build out of the TV station. He was also the recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee for community service. So here's a guy who spent a lot of time, a lot of work working with the United Way and also broadcasting it. And Bruce, welcome to The Mayor Helps. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you very much for asking me here.
Good. One question I can't let go. I got to start with that. So you went to Brock University. So did you start off in radio or TV?
Radio. My first foray into radio was at the campus radio station at Brock University in St. Catharines. Long story short, we acquired a 2-hour radio show to talk about the university on a local radio station who ended up offering me a job. So I quit university and went into radio. Probably not the path that my parents had in mind, and not what I had in mind either, but it just kind of happened that way.
Excellent. So from there, where did you go work? Where was your next?
The first radio station I worked at was in Welland, Ontario. CHOW are the call letters, and then I went to CKTB in St. Catharines. Then I got fired, so then I went to Kitchener. I worked at a station called CKGL and Chime, and then I went to London, Ontario, home of Lisa Helps.
That's right. And I grew up with listening to Bruce on the radio when I was a kid.
And that's how old I am. Lisa, thank you very much. But but yeah, so in London.
Okay, when I was a teenager.
That's better. That's better. So doing radio in London on a morning show, I then switched over and did one of Canada's first breakfast TV shows at CFPL Television, and then bounced around and did various things as a producer and community relations guy and on-air host there. And then the parent company at the time was Chum Broadcasting, who brought me to Vancouver Island to help put the new VI on the air. And I actually opened up the bureau in Nanaimo first and managed the Mid-Island region from there, and hosted the breakfast TV show from there for a few years, then came down here, went back up there, and then came back down here, and I'm still here. So now, what do you think about this whole podcast thing? When somebody says to you podcast, what is the thing that rattles in the back of your head first thing? A conversation. I think it's great. It's sort of taken some of the mystery out of it, but media for a long time people felt was untouchable. It sort of lived on a plateau where people didn't feel they could interact with it. I think this is a game changer, and I think it's a really great way to engage with people and exchange ideas, as long as it's done, respectfully. That's the bottom line on it for me, but I think they're great. Yeah, it's interesting to me because I speak to my old, my claim to fame is I went to college with George Strombolopoulos, and at a certain point I branched off and did music and went into the recording studio side of things, and he stayed broadcasting, and that was always my personal take on it was, because I worked at CFRB in Toronto, and there was always gatekeepers, and so as much as, the first word that comes to mind when I hear podcast, I think radio. I mean, this is just radio that we're doing, really. I mean, other than the fact that we've got, a video with it, but it is an opportunity. It democratizes the medium. And so it also, to me, it brings back the medium is the message with McLuhan, right? Well, so many people are producing podcasts because people have something to say. And so, so let's jump from the revisiting old times, and
fast forward to today. You're now the CEO of the Victoria Chamber, and I would assume that you work quite a bit with the mayor already. But I would like to hear from you. What are you hearing word on the streets in terms of what businesses are doing to move through COVID? I'm reluctant to use the term "get past" because clearly we're not past anything. What are you hearing on the street? What are some of the top concerns among businesses, and what are some of the solutions that you're hearing?
I actually did a little survey up. Our office is on Fort Street, and I had a call last week with Minister Carol James with some other people to discuss a few things, including the mayor, who was on that same call. So I just did a little walk up and down the street for about an hour, went to talk to store owners and merchants to say, what's going on? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What do you want? What do you feel needs to be done? A lot of the conversation we were having with Minister James was about the idea of bringing government office workers back into the offices downtown to help create a little bit more activity on the economic side, to get people back into restaurants and cafes and shoe stores and clothing stores and record shops and that kind of thing. So what we're hearing from the business people are that things are way down. I had people say that they are year to year, they're down anything between 30 and 70%. All of them are generally very optimistic about where things are going, and they think that the recovery, this was last week before the recent spate of outbreaks that we had, they were optimistic that we were on a cautious path back, but they definitely said they were missing the office workers downtown who really are the economy during the day that make things go around. So yeah, I have not really spoken to anybody since we've had the most recent reports on the outbreak and the new cases on Vancouver Island. And today, as of this day, on the 22nd, we have another report coming up from Minister Dix and Dr. Bonnie Henry this afternoon. So I don't know, Mayor, maybe you've heard a little more than I have about what that announcement or what that conversation is going to be about. I get the feeling that there is still a fair amount of optimism, but realistically, a lot of people are still pretty frightened on the economic front and what that's doing to their mental health and to their well-being and their feelings of security. I'm an optimist by nature, but I'm not sort of pulling the wool over my own eyes either. I know we have a long way to go to get back from this, and whatever the next economy is going to look like, it probably won't be an exact mirror of what it was before, because when we talk to people all the time, and I do 7 or 8 of these a day with different people, people are seeing pretty drastic changes and pivots and shifts in the way they do business. And some of the things that have become necessary because of COVID will become the usual way of doing things. I have some fear about what the future of commercial space is and of commercial office space, and how many people will feel that working from home is a better option for them. And I don't have a conclusive answer for that either, because I don't think we have any real determined path with that yet. But I do worry about what's going to happen with commercial space, quite frankly. And if it has to get to the point of being repurposed, what does that look like? And the other concern that I have is the people that are being displaced out of their jobs, in some cases out of a career. Again, when Mayor and I were speaking with the minister last week, we pointed out that this possibly is an opportunity to upskill and retrain a large element of the workforce who don't really have a skill right now. And as we go forward into the next economy, we're going to have this opportunity to be better educated and better skilled to provide a more balanced and diverse economy. So I think that's another opportunity that we need to look at right now.
Are you seeing other communities, other chambers, coast to coast, that are able to implement different strategies and help out their membership base?
We have correspondence with the Canadian Chamber on a pretty regular basis, so they're providing tons of resource for chambers across the country. There are 4 other chambers in this region too: West Shore, Souk, the Peninsula, and Esquimalt all have smaller chambers. They, I know, are all working very closely with their members to monitor what's going on with them too. We're trying to work a little bit more closely with each other because we are, of course, one regional economy. They each have a very strong mandate with their own sort of uber local economy where they are, in Sydney or in Colwood or in New Royal or wherever it might be. As for other chambers in the province, I haven't really had a handle on that because I've been so intensely involved with learning here, first of all, drinking from the fire hose, figuring out what's going on, and just looking at the business case for the chamber going forward and how we can stay as strong and robust as we possibly can. So, to be honest with you, a chamber operates on revenue that comes from memberships, membership fees, and from events. Events, not so much, not going to happen. And the membership, we're just now starting to invoice people. As far back as March, it would have been a bit tone deaf, I think, to do that before then. So we have sent out invoices. I've done little video messages for people with the complete understanding that we know the circumstance everyone is in. And we are seeing people renew their membership, which is great because, frankly, the chamber has never been more important than it is right now, like ever. This chamber was founded in 1863, and I think this is an absolutely pivotal time. So yes, we are seeing renewals, but we know that there will probably be a reduction in the overall membership number. So I'm looking at some other possible revenue streams to keep the chamber as strong and active as it can be.
What are your numbers in the chamber? How far down are you in terms of membership?
Don't really have a projection right now. We came into this with about 1,400 members. I can't really anticipate what that number is going to be going forward until we get a better idea of who's renewing and who's not. I know that in the last economic challenge in 2009 and 2010, this chamber lost, I believe, about 300 members at that time. That was more an economic crisis, of course. This is an economic crisis created by something else, so it's not a mirror of that. So I honestly don't have a number of where we're going to land on this. I hope, for the sake of businesses and for the chamber, that we have as many of those 1,400 as possible, but I know the likelihood is that we may not. But having said that, in the last, I've been here, this is my 6th week, we've had about 9 new members join the chamber since then. So that's kind of encouraging for me too.
Bruce, you and I talk a lot, so
yeah.
I have to remember that this isn't one of our regular meetings. But I did want to ask you, a part of the mayorhelps.com, part of this show is we have a business person on here once a week, and they get to ask a question. And one of the things that impresses me over and over again is how they've really pivoted their businesses to adapt to the circumstances, to in some cases seize completely new opportunities. And so, do you have some stories about that? Like, how's that happening with the people that you've spoken with? Any highlights, or because part of being an entrepreneur is that you're inherently creative, and there's nothing like the crisis of the last 4 months to really force creativity. So anything that you've seen that you want to share for other businesses to maybe take example from?
Yeah, there's been some great leadership shown, I think, in the hospitality sector. People with restaurants, catering companies, food services have found that they can actually be quite nimble when it comes to takeout and delivery. The one that's a real shining example of that is Big Wheel Burger and Kalen McNeil, who's been a bit of a rock star from the very beginning. He's been able to, he right as this all started to happen, he opened up his newest location, which is in Nanaimo, actually. But because of the pivot they made to make things happen online, that has now become the second busiest store in their whole chain. So he's been able to do that. I've seen the other folks in the neighborhood here down around 4th Street, and Amanda and I have been doing takeout stuff at home on a regular basis too. And they've all been very responsive, and we found some new places to order from and have been really impressed by the quality of that service. Takeout in the past wasn't front line for a lot of places, so very often by the time you received your food, it wasn't in A1 condition. But I think right now everybody has upped their game, and they've made it a pretty enjoyable experience. I'm not going to endorse places and name names, but they're from across the region, and I think they've done a really good job in doing that. Other stores that, again, in this hood down here, Russell Books, for example, did a great job of staying in contact with people. You could order puzzles and books, and they had a system where you could pick it up and do it socially distanced, and they had someone at the door that made all of that stuff happen. So that's been cool to see. We go out Amanda and I go on a regular basis and visit different neighborhoods. We go to Sydney and walk up and down Beacon Avenue, and they've all been very responsive on the retail side there. Oak Bay Avenue, the same thing. We live in View Royal, which doesn't really have a commercial hub per se, but most of the businesses that we've seen in our neighborhood have been very responsive. So I think everybody didn't outwardly show a lot of fear, if you will, or trepidation. There was lots of caution and there was lots of care, and that's been really impressive for me to see from everybody.
I do another podcast with a co-host out of the States, and we spoke with a gentleman who has a restaurant called Trap House Barbecue in Phoenix, Arizona. And he was relaying the story about what happened. So he was a New York native, transplanted to Phoenix, opened up a barbecue place, thought it would be easy to open a restaurant, which was, I thought, humorous to say the least. Then he, this COVID thing hits, and they've got to move forward like all other entrepreneurs are the same thing. So he developed a system where he brought his bartender in once a week, and the bartender pre-mixed all the drinks into juice boxes. So
Oh,
as you
wow.
go, when you pick up your lunch, you can grab your pre-mixed juice box drink, which I thought was, I don't know how our liquor laws would handle that here, but I thought it was pretty creative.
So it said orange juice on the box, but it was actually a tequila sunrise or something.
Yeah, well, yeah, something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it worked out well. So are there any other businesses that you're hearing that are, I guess with what you're doing, if I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce, are you holding virtual meetings online so we're able to share information? Because that's one of the most helpful things, is to share information among business owners.
Yeah, one of the social events that the Chamber has always done on a regular basis are the business mixers, which would normally, of course, be a gathering of 100 or so people in one place. Can't do that right now. So we have been doing those virtually. We had one that was a ton of fun. We did it with the Harbor Cats baseball team. So when you do these kind of a Zoom thing and you go into breakout rooms, you have to kill time between the rooms when you do that before you break out. So I'm a kind of an old-time baseball nerd. And I had a whole bunch of trivia things to tell people about baseball in between. And that just made for a really collegial, great feeling. It's been interesting to have that experience. I try to imagine what it would have been like in person, and it would probably not have been as intimate. So yeah, we do that. I've also undertaken a pledge that I'm going to, my target is to have a direct one-on-one meeting with 100 members a month. So if you do the math on that, that's 25 a week, 5 a day, 15 minutes per meeting. So I kind of stick those in between everything else I'm doing, just to get feedback and get a feel for it. And they're just starting to get rolling now. And I've been speaking with some fairly large sized members, but I'm going to be dealing with more of the smaller members very soon. 80% of the members of the Chamber are companies of less than 10 employees. And those are the ones that I'm most anxious to speak with as soon as possible, because that's going to be that's kind of where it's at, right? We know that retail will see some challenges in hospitality, but things that weren't even really declared as an essential service are still very important. Small-time electrical contractors, plumbing companies, appliance repair places. Because I was thinking, one day I was doing something with our stove at home, and I realized that I couldn't use the touchpad to set the timer right. So there's something kind of wonky in the motherboard there, and I'm thinking, oh, that's great. In the middle of this, I'm going to suddenly lose the use of my stove and my oven. So we haven't had to call anybody yet, but I did check into it, and a lot of them were still open, right? Because I don't believe they were declared an essential service, but they kind of are. If you can't cook, you can't eat. So I'm kind of anxious to see what operations of that size are doing right now and how they see themselves in the future. I'm also curious to see what people are going to start to consider a luxury. Things that you eliminate from your spending when you think that you might not have the capacity you did before. So I'm wondering how that fits in with like landscaping companies and garden companies and sprinkler repair companies and people like that. Is that the kind of thing that people will now find that they don't have the capacity to continue with? And if so, what's the future of that kind of stuff? So little, niche services. I don't have a lot of direct feedback as of yet, but I will within a couple of weeks.
I look forward to getting your feedback on it. That would be good to get an update at some point to see how people are doing. Cause my, day job is, I own the wet cleaner with my partner, Cindy, and we've taken a shellacking, to use an old school term, on it. So let's lighten up the conversation briefly, and then I will let you go out of respect for your time. So baseball guy, are you a Blue Jays fan? You got to be a Jays fan, Southern Ontario.
Not a chance. No, I'm a Detroit Tigers.
Oh man. Okay. All right.
They're in a rebuilding phase right now. We like to call it. I had a lot of family in Windsor, Ontario, and for that reason became as a kid, I was a Red Wing fan and a Detroit Tiger fan, and both are in a very serious rebuilding mode right now. They both suck. They're hot, but the future is bright, I'm sure.
Can I ask another question that's not sports related before we let you go?
Yes.
Bruce, again, this is asking you to look into a crystal ball a little bit, but one of the things that's really happened here, and this started early on in our business calls when we were meeting twice a week, a real kind of push towards shop YYJ, local YYJ, local. And I think that is benefiting our retailers and our restaurants, particularly our retailers. Do you think that that's something that people that will stay, this reorientation away from Amazon and towards local?
I hope it does, and I hope people will come to a better understanding of that. I understand in some cases price point is a factor, so that they're still going to have to shop, they feel, at Walmart or Superstore. But I think people who take the time to seek out locally sourced and manufactured and made products here, services and things like that, they'll find that it's a better experience to work with somebody who is local. I have in the back of my mind, when I have time, I want to try and look into something about helping people better understand local Like, what exactly does local mean? Yes, your neighbor might work for a large international company of some kind, which does contribute to the economy. But the true nature of locally owned and operated companies, and for that matter, our food sources, are going to be really important going forward. The food sovereignty factor kind of bubbled up a little bit in the middle of all this between sourcing people that would be gleaning the fruit and the vegetables that we're growing right now, and the foreign workers that may or may not have been able to arrive here. But I think the idea that we're very vulnerable when it comes to our food source, people are going to understand that, sure, you're buying stuff from a grocery store, but you need to understand that the farms that surround us are also important, making sure that that's going to be in place so that we can source local and shop local too. It's a difficult thing to understand sometimes because of the convenience factor of how we shop. But if you just take the time to understand how much more impacting it is when you spend your money with a truly local company, that money recirculates in this economy and it doesn't leave to go to, a head office someplace else. It's something that I think we have to really embrace as much as we possibly can within our means to understand and have capacity to do that.
That's great. Thank you.
Bruce, before I let you go, I think that's a fabulous idea. And the other podcast that I deal with is currently is called The Backbone, and it's a small business podcast. And that would be something where we could connect the dots, because the whole point is to connect people horizontally, as opposed to waiting for solutions vertically, because that ain't going to happen anymore. There's no, as I heard say, the cavalry ain't coming. So it's, especially when you're living on an island, to be able to tell people, when you go to the butcher store, the local butcher store, and you buy your meat there, not only does it taste better, it's higher quality, you're probably going to have to eat less of it, and it's supporting the community. You give that person money, he pays his staff, and all that money stays within. So building something out, some sort of explanation to really explain to people, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe something we could chat about later on offline.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Amanda and I cook a lot. I do a lot of cooking. We both love food, but we want to make sure that it's as good as it possibly can be. And we do source local at every possible opportunity. We're the people that go to the farm markets and go to the small little niche food producers. I think it's got just great personality. Yeah, we go to grocery stores too. But the other smaller ones, to me, are just a more engaging experience with the food that you prepare and eat.
Nothing quite like sea asparagus from Souk, is there?
Gotta like that. Stuff from the peninsula, it's all good. Chosen Farms, all of them. They're wonderful.
Thanks for your time, Bruce. I appreciate it. It's been nice meeting you. Take care.
Thanks for asking. See ya. Bye.
Thanks for joining the Mayor Helps on Tundra Media. If you enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And visit themayorhelps.com to submit your questions to the show.